The rain had been falling over the village for as long as anyone could remember. Some said it started the night the old temple collapsed, others whispered it was punishment for ancient sins. No one knew for sure. But everyone knew about the mansion on the hill. It was old, blackened by time and rain, swallowed by thick vines and mist. Villagers avoided it, saying strange shadows moved inside at night, and sometimes faint lights flickered in the upper windows. Arman had inherited the house from his grandfather and arrived one stormy evening. The wind tore at his coat as he approached the rotting wooden door, which groaned as he pushed it open. Inside, the mansion smelled of wet earth and decay. The main hall was vast, with furniture covered in dust-stained cloths, floors creaking under every step. In the center of the room, a large trapdoor with an iron ring drew his attention. Villagers' warnings echoed in his mind, "The thing under the house, do not wake it." Lightning flashed, illuminating the trapdoor and the carved words on its surface, "Do not open after midnight." Arman's curiosity battled his fear, and he felt the first chill of something ancient watching him from below. By the time Arman reached the trapdoor, the storm had grown violent. Rain pounded the roof and wind rattled the broken windows, forcing him to steady his lantern. The iron ring looked worn, scratched deep from countless openings over decades. A faint, wet scratching sound echoed from beneath, slow and deliberate, as if something alive was testing the air. Arman's heart raced, but curiosity pushed him forward. He lifted the trapdoor slowly, a blast of cold, damp air rushed up, carrying the scent of earth and something older, metallic. The basement below stretched into darkness, tunnels branching unpredictably. His lantern flickered, shadows dancing along the stone walls. Then he saw them, shapes moving just beyond the light. Too large to be rats, too deliberate to be anything natural. The low gurgling sound of wet, dragging claws filled the space, echoing through the tunnels. Arman froze. The mansion wasn't merely a house, it was alive, and whatever stirred beneath the trapdoor had been waiting for him. Arman's hand trembled as he descended the creaking wooden stairs into the basement. The air grew colder with every step, thick with the smell of mud, decay, and something ancient that made his stomach churn. His lantern flickered, casting long, twitching shadows on the stone walls. The tunnels twisted unpredictably, narrow and suffocating, the wet stone slick beneath his boots. Coins, old, tarnished, mud-covered, lay scattered along the walls, glinting faintly in the lantern light, almost like a lure. Then he heard it, slow, deliberate breathing, wet and heavy, echoing through the underground chambers. From the darkness, pale, thin limbs emerged, crawling across the floor in a grotesque, deliberate rhythm. Its eyes glowed yellow, unblinking. Arman stumbled backward, heart hammering, realizing that this creature, whatever it was, had been waiting for centuries, patient and intelligent, drawn by the same greed that now gripped him. Every instinct screamed to run, but the twisting labyrinth of tunnels offered no clear escape. The mansion, the gold, and the thing that guarded it were all part of the same ancient, merciless hunger. The creature advanced with impossible patience, limbs bending in unnatural angles as it followed him through the twisting tunnels. Each step made a wet, dragging sound that echoed endlessly, bouncing off stone walls and amplifying the suffocating silence. The piles of gold glimmered faintly, stacked high into shadowed corners, as if grown from the earth itself, taunting him with their allure. Arman's breath came in ragged gasps, thick with the smell of decay, mud, and something older, alive beneath the floor. Shadows along the walls seemed to stretch and curl like living tendrils, reaching toward him. Panic surged, yet fear froze him momentarily. He forced himself to move, following a narrow, downward-sloping tunnel, water dripping from the ceiling, floor slick with mud. The creature's wet gurgling grew louder, more insistent, a promise that hunger would not rest. The twisting passages seemed endless, each corner revealing darker shapes, testing his sanity. Arman understood, in a bone-deep way, that the mansion, the gold, and the awakened guardian were one entity, patient, merciless, and he had become its prey. Arman stumbled forward, the narrow stone walls pressing in on either side. The tunnels twisted unpredictably, and the air grew colder, heavy with damp earth and decay. Behind him, the creature's glowing yellow eyes never wavered, following silently, limbs bending in impossible ways as it advanced with terrifying patience. Each movement made wet, sucking noises that echoed endlessly, confusing his sense of distance. Faint glimmers of gold coins lined the walls, a cruel lure that promised treasure but hid deadly danger. Shadows shifted unnaturally, stretching across the floor like living fingers, as if the mansion itself was aware of his presence. Panic surged, yet instinct kept him moving. He followed a narrow passage downward, water dripping from above, slick stone underfoot. The creature's wet gurgling grew louder, echoing through the labyrinth, a reminder that the hunger it fed on was insatiable. Arman realized that the mansion, the gold, and the guardian were all part of the same ancient, malevolent force. Escape was uncertain, and each breath drew him deeper into the darkness. Arman's legs ached, and his lungs burned as he forced himself deeper into the twisting tunnels. The damp stone walls seemed to close in, every step echoing with a wet, dragging sound from behind. The creature followed relentlessly, its glowing yellow eyes fixed on him, limbs moving with unnatural, patient precision. Pools of stagnant water reflected his lantern's flickering light, revealing glimpses of tarnished gold scattered along the floor, a cruel beacon drawing him onward. Shadows along the walls shifted and writhed, curling like living tendrils, and Arman realized with growing horror that the mansion itself was alive, feeding on fear, greed, and the centuries of those who had dared enter. The smell of mud, decay, and something older pressed on him, thick and suffocating. Ahead, a vast chamber opened up, walls lined with gold piled impossibly high. The creature paused at the threshold, tilting its head as if calculating, letting out a wet, gurgling sound that reverberated through the vast underground space. Arman knew then that the treasure was not meant to be taken. This was a trap laid for those who were greedy, a hunger that would not be sated until it claimed him or drove him mad. Every instinct screamed for flight, but the labyrinthine tunnels offered no safe escape, only deeper darkness and the unyielding presence of the ancient guardian. Arman's hands shook as he stepped into the vast underground chamber. The ceiling loomed high above, disappearing into darkness, and walls were stacked with countless gold coins, slick with mud and grime. The air was thick and cold, carrying the scent of wet earth, decay, and something ancient, alive beneath the stone. The creature moved slowly across the floor, limbs bending in grotesque ways, its glowing yellow eyes locked on him. Each step produced a wet, dragging sound that echoed endlessly, bouncing off the stone and making it impossible to judge distance. Shadows twisted unnaturally along the walls, stretching toward him like dark, living fingers. Arman's pulse raced as he realized that the gold had been a lure, awakening a hunger that had slept for centuries. The creature's low gurgle vibrated through the chamber, patient, intelligent, and relentless. Panic surged, but the twisting tunnels offered no clear escape. Every instinct screamed at him to run, yet the mansion seemed to stretch endlessly, a labyrinth designed to trap those drawn by greed. The creature's gaze never wavered, the ancient hunger had found its prey, and there was no turning back. Arman understood, in a chilling clarity, that once awakened, this force would not rest until it had consumed everything it desired, gold, life, and fear. Arman stumbled backward, heart hammering, as the creature advanced toward him with unnerving patience. Its twisted limbs bent at impossible angles, claws dragging across the stone floor with wet, echoing sounds that made his skin crawl. The piles of gold that had seemed so enticing now felt like a cruel trap, glowing faintly in the lantern's flickering light. Shadows along the walls writhed and stretched, as if the mansion itself were alive, feeding on his fear. He pressed forward blindly, following a narrow, downward-sloping tunnel that disappeared into darkness, water dripping from the ceiling and slicking the stone beneath his feet. The creature's gurgling grew louder, a wet, insistent sound promising relentless pursuit. The maze-like tunnels twisted impossibly, doubling back on themselves, as if designed to ensure no one left alive. Arman's breath came in ragged gasps, every instinct screamed to flee, yet the twisting labyrinth drew him deeper into the darkness. He realized with a chilling certainty that the mansion, the gold, and the guardian were inseparable, an ancient, malevolent force that had waited centuries for someone foolish enough to awaken it. There was no turning back, and the hunger had already found him. Arman's vision blurred as he ran through the narrowing tunnels, the cold damp stone pressing close around him. The creature's wet gurgling echoed from behind, relentless and patient, as if it knew exactly where he would step next. Every flicker of his lantern cast grotesque shadows along the walls, twisting and writhing like living fingers reaching for him. Gold glinted faintly in corners, a cruel lure that seemed to pulse with a malevolent life, beckoning him deeper into the labyrinth. The air grew heavier with each step, thick with mud, decay, and something far older than the mansion itself. His heart pounded, lungs burning, as he stumbled into a widening chamber, the walls stacked impossibly high with ancient coins. The creature paused at the entrance, tilting its head, eyes glowing yellow, dripping with wet menace. It gurgled low and deep, a sound that vibrated through the stone and seemed to reach into Arman's very bones. Panic surged, but reason screamed in vain. The tunnels twisted endlessly, and escape was uncertain. The mansion had claimed him in ways he could not yet comprehend. One step further, and he realized fully, this hunger, awakened by greed, would not be denied, and he was trapped within its ancient, merciless grip. Arman's legs ached, and every breath burned as he pressed forward through the labyrinthine tunnels. The creature's gurgling grew louder, closer, echoing off the damp stone walls with terrifying clarity. Shadows along the floor and ceiling twisted unnaturally, curling like living tendrils, as if the mansion itself were reaching for him. The piles of ancient gold seemed to pulse in the dim light, a cruel beacon that had lured him deeper underground. He stumbled into a vast chamber, ceilings lost in darkness, walls stacked impossibly high with coins. The creature moved with deliberate patience, its glowing yellow eyes fixed on him, every limb bending in grotesque, unnatural angles. Arman realized with growing horror that the gold was not treasure, it was bait. The mansion had waited centuries for this moment, feeding on fear and greed, and now the ancient hunger had him in its grasp. He wanted to run, to flee into the twisting, endless tunnels, but the labyrinth offered no escape. The low, wet gurgle of the creature reverberated through the chamber, a chilling promise that it would not rest, and that he was prey in a game far older and more merciless than anything he had imagined. Arman's pulse raced as he stumbled deeper into the twisting underground chambers. The air was thick with cold, damp earth, and the scent of decay pressed heavily on his chest. Shadows along the walls shifted unnaturally, curling and stretching like living tendrils, and the piles of gold glimmered faintly, cruelly, as if mocking his fear. The creature's wet gurgling echoed behind him, patient and relentless, limbs bending in impossible angles as it closed in. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, yet the labyrinthous tunnels twisted endlessly, doubling back on themselves, offering no clear escape. Water dripped from the ceilings, slicking the stone floors beneath his feet, making each step treacherous. The mansion itself seemed alive, feeding off his terror, its heartbeat synchronized with the low growl of the ancient guardian. Arman realized in bone-deep clarity that the gold had been bait, a trap to awaken a hunger that had slept for centuries. One misstep, one glance back, and the creature's patient pursuit could end him. The underground labyrinth pressed in from all sides, suffocating, endless, and he understood the terrifying truth: the mansion, the gold, and the guardian were a single, ancient force, merciless and eternal, and he was now irrevocably its prey. Arman's body ached, and his mind raced as he pressed onward through the suffocating darkness. The tunnels twisted unpredictably, water dripping steadily from above, slicking the stone beneath his feet. Every step echoed ominously, amplified by the wet, dragging gurgle of the creature behind him. Shadows stretched and writhed along the walls, moving independently, curling like fingers reaching for him. The faint glimmer of ancient gold glowed in corners, luring him deeper, cruel and irresistible. Panic surged, yet his legs moved almost automatically, guided by fear. Ahead, the tunnels opened into a massive chamber, ceilings lost in shadow, walls stacked impossibly high with coins, slick with mud and grime. The creature paused at the entrance, its yellow eyes gleaming, limbs twisted unnaturally, every movement deliberate and patient. Arman realized, with chilling clarity, that the treasure had been a trap all along, a lure to awaken a hunger that had slumbered for centuries. The mansion itself seemed alive, feeding off fear and greed, and he was trapped. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the labyrinth offered no escape. The low, wet gurgle of the creature reverberated through the chamber, promising that once awakened, this hunger would not rest until it claimed him completely. Arman's legs trembled as he reached the center of the vast chamber. The piles of gold rose impossibly high, slick with mud, reflecting the faint, flickering light of his lantern. The creature had stopped a few meters away, tilting its head, yellow eyes glimmering with ancient hunger. The wet gurgling vibrated through the chamber, syncing with his pounding heartbeat. Shadows on the walls twisted, moving like living fingers, reaching toward him. Panic surged, yet his mind raced, there had to be a way out. Then he noticed a narrow tunnel in the far corner, partially hidden behind a stack of coins. Could it be an escape? He took a deep breath and ran toward it, slipping through mud-slick stones. Behind him, the creature lunged with unnatural speed, claws scraping the stone floor. The chamber seemed endless, alive, swallowing the sound of his frantic steps. Arman's lungs burned, each breath thick with the smell of decay and wet earth, and a chilling thought struck him: he was running not just from the creature, but from the mansion itself. He plunged into the narrow tunnel, darkness enveloping him. The walls seemed to close in, the ceiling low and dripping cold water. Behind him, the gurgling grew louder, then abruptly stopped. Silence. A faint, heavy breathing filled the air. Arman's foot slipped, sending him sliding along the wet stone, scraping his hands. Ahead, a faint light glimmered, an exit, or another trap. He scrambled forward, heart hammering. Suddenly, the creature emerged from the shadows, grotesque limbs twisting as it lunged. Arman barely ducked into a small alcove, holding his breath as the monster's glowing eyes swept past him. The mansion groaned around him, walls shaking as if alive. Then, in a final desperate sprint, he crawled through a hidden passage, bursting out into the storm-soaked night. Rain drenched him instantly, the creature nowhere in sight. Behind him, the mansion sat silent, shadowed, its hunger unsated, waiting for the next fool drawn by greed. Arman collapsed on the muddy ground, gasping. He had escaped, but the memory of what lay beneath, the ancient hunger, would haunt him forever.